welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing really well today. So I am so excited for my videos this week because I am getting into some spring dress sewing projects. And the first one that I have to share with you guys today is somewhere between a maxi dress and a midi dress, I guess you could say. And I really love how this one turned out. So let me show it to you. So here's what the dress looks like. It has these sleeves with a little tie detailing and it buttons down the front. It is a princess themed style, and then in the back it has this cute little tie detail. So the pattern that I used for this dress is the True Bias Shelby dress pattern, but I did edit the sleeves to make them a little bit different. And I was inspired by this dress that I saw from Olive Clothing. So I will put a picture here so you can kind of see where I was taking my inspiration from for this dress. And then this fabric is so lovely. I found this on Etsy from a Korean fabric shop, and I love the really drapey nature of this fabric. It is a viscose with a little bit of a satiny feel and really, really good quality. I did wash and dry this fabric, and this is what it looks like out of the machine dryer, so I'm really happy with that. So I'm so excited to wear this dress over the spring and summer months, and I'm going to go ahead and jump in and show you how I made it. So to get started making this dress, I'm going to begin by cutting out all of my pattern pieces. I'm using the Shelby dress pattern from True Bias, which is a princess themed dress pattern. So that means I will have 3 panel pieces for the back and 2 panel pieces for each side of the front because this does button down the front. Now for the most part, I'm just cutting out the pieces as they come in the pattern, but I will show you a couple of alterations that I'm going to make to 2 of the pieces. First alteration I'm making is just to raise the neckline 1 inch. So on the front center piece, I'm measuring up 1 inch from the neckline and then cutting that and matching the curve so that it tapers nicely towards the shoulder. Then I'll match this same curve on the facing piece so that I can line this piece really easily. The main alteration I'm going to do to the pattern is to change up the sleeves so that it is this cute puffy tie sleeve instead of a plain short sleeve. So the first thing I'm going to do is fold this piece in half so that I can cut this piece down the center. Once this piece is split into 2 halves, I'm going to place it on my fabric and measure so that I have about 4 inches of extra fabric in the center to allow me to gather this up and create a puffy sleeve. Then I'll pin my pattern piece down and go ahead and cut this out. I'm also going to add about 3 inches of extra length to the pattern because I wanted my sleeves to be just a little bit longer. Then I wanted to add almost like a keyhole detail to these sleeves where the tie meets in the center. So to do this, I'm just folding the sleeve pieces in half and cutting a little curved shape along this center part. But that's it for the sleeve piece, but I also need to make the tie cuff. So to do this, I'm going to take the pattern piece once again, and this time place it back together. Then I'll measure out 7 extra inches from either side of the end of the pattern and cut out a strip of fabric that is 3 inches wide. I'm cutting this out twice so that I have 1 for each sleeve. So with all of that done, we're ready to get started sewing the dress. And the first step to do this is to make the waist ties for the back of the dress. So I'm going to take my waist tie pieces and fold them in half and pin all the way down the length of this piece. Then I'll sew this down with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way down the long part of this piece and then one of the short ends. Next, I'm going to trim away any excess seam allowance from the tie pieces just to make them easier to turn right side out. And then I will use my trusty knitting needle to help me turn this towards the right side, and then I'll press it down with my iron. ready to start assembling the dress panels, but first I'm going to pin the waist ties in place on the back center piece of the dress. There are notches that indicate where to place the waist ties, so I am just finding those notches and matching the ties up with those notches and pinning them in place. And with the waist ties pinned in place, I can go ahead and add the side panels to the back. So I'm going to place these together with the right sides together and go ahead and pin these down. I am making sure that that waist tie is sandwiched in between the two pieces so that it gets caught in my sewing, and then I'll take this over to the sewing machine and sew these seams with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and use my serger to finish the raw edges. I'm going to repeat the same process to sew the side front pieces to the center front pieces, but I will not sew this together in the middle because that will become the button placket later on. Now with the front and back pieces assembled, we can go ahead and sew the shoulder seams. So I'm going to match the shoulders together with the right sides together and pin these in place. And while I'm at it, I'm going to actually go ahead and pin the side seams together and take this all to the sewing machine and sew it down at the same time, just because it saves a little bit of time. So with the main part of the dress constructed, we can move on to making the facing, and this will line the neckline and front edge of the dress. Now off camera, I went ahead and applied some fusible interfacing to my facing just to make it have a little bit more structure since I will be making buttonholes. And then I'm going to sew this together at the shoulder seams. I'm also going to use my serger to finish the raw edges of these seams as well as the entire outside edge of the facing. Now I can add the facing to the front of the dress. So I like to start by placing the facing and the dress with the right sides together and matching them up along the shoulder seams. Then I'll just pin all the way around the neckline and all the way down each side of the front of the dress and sew this on with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. ahead and understitched the neckline just a little bit so that it would turn to the inside very neatly. And then I went ahead and took this over to the iron and pressed the facing towards the inside of the dress. Before we move on to the sleeves, I had to give you a quick peek out my window because this was my view while I was sewing on this beautiful spring day. The saucer magnolia is in full bloom and it's so pretty. So moving on to the sleeves, the first step to make these cute tie sleeves is to go ahead and hem the little keyhole detail. So to do this, I'm just going to fold this under about 1/4 inch twice and use my iron to press it down. I found that this was pretty easy to turn under because it was almost like turning something on the bias because of the way I cut the angle of the keyhole. So I didn't find it too difficult to turn and press at all. So I'm just pressing that down, and then I'll take this over to the sewing machine and top stitch around the curve. The next step is to sew the side seams for the sleeves. So I'm just going to fold my sleeves so that the right sides are together and pin and sew along the side seam. And then to turn the sleeve into a puffy sleeve, I'm going to add 2 rows of gathering stitches to the bottom and the top of the sleeve. Moving on next to the tie cuff, I've started by marking the center of this piece, and I'm going to use my pattern piece as a guide here and match up the centers of these 2 pieces. Then I'm going to fold the cuff piece in half and start pinning at the edge of the pattern piece and then pin all the way down each end of this piece. Then I'll sew the 2 ends down, leaving the center as a gap and turning each end into almost like a ribbon. I like to point off the edge here just to give it a really cute look for the ties, but we want to leave the center open so that the sleeve can go in the center. Then I'll turn this towards the right side and press it down. As I'm pressing this down, I'm making sure that the edges of the gap in the center are turned towards the inside. So next I can add the cuff to the sleeve, but first I need to pull my gathering threads and adjust the gathers in the sleeve to fit to the cuff of the sleeve. Then I'm going to place the edge of the sleeve inside that gap in the cuff and pin this all the way around. Next, I'll take this over to the sewing machine and just top stitch all the way around the edge of the sleeve. So now I can go ahead and add the sleeve to the armhole of my dress, and the first step to do this is to start to pull on the gathering threads and adjust these to be nice and even. Next, I'll match up the side seam of the sleeve with the side seam of the dress and adjust the gathers to fit into the armhole and pin all the way around the armhole. Then I'll take this over to the sewing machine and sew this in place with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and use my serger to finish off the edge. I decided to tie the ends of the sleeve into a little bow. It also looked cute tied in a knot, and you could extend the length of this to be however long you wanted. Next, I'm just going to add my buttonholes and buttons to the front of the dress. So I'm using the button guide that was included with the pattern to mark the placement for my buttonholes going all the way down the dress. Then I'll go over to my sewing machine and sew my buttonholes. And I was really glad that I used fusible interfacing on this piece because it was much easier to sew the buttonholes on this thin fabric. I'm using a seam ripper to carefully open up the buttonholes, and then I'm ready to mark the placement for the buttons. So to do this, I like to overlay the front pieces, and then I can just use pins to go through the buttonholes and mark where each button should be sewn on. I'm using these cute little cream colored buttons, and I'm just going to sew these on using a needle and thread. And then the final step to making this dress is just to hem it. So at this point I had tried the dress on just to check the length and also evened out the edge with my scissors. Then I took it over to the serger and finished the raw edge, and then just folded this under and top stitched it down for a very simple hem. So here is a look at how this dress turned out. I'm really happy with it, and I especially love the sleeve detailing. I think it turned out so cute, and this fabric is so nice and light and swishy. I think it's something I will really enjoy wearing over the spring and summer, and I'm also really happy to have something this color in my wardrobe because it is one of my favorite colors, but I feel like I don't wear it enough. So I was really pleased with how this project turned out. Alright guys, that is going to be it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed seeing how this dress came together. I really love the final result, and I'm looking forward to wearing this one. And I will be back on Saturday with another dress video, so I hope you'll look forward to that. And if you are not already subscribed, you can go ahead and subscribe by clicking the red button down below if you would like to be notified when that video comes out. But thank you guys so much for watching and hanging out here on my channel today, and I will talk to you in my next video. Bye!